Welcome to the first module of the Fundamentals of Thrive Beyond 5D. And today we're going to focus on what's at the essence of health, vitality, and longevity, which is the core of all of life, the mitochondria uses oxygen. We're going to discuss the basic structure, what we're learning that it does for longevity, for mental health, for metabolism, how hormesis works. We'll make sure we define it now even more clearly and give examples. And Yati will give a quick overview of this 2-week practice we're going to do, which includes the topics we're going to go in 8 parts today. And he'll introduce what we're going to have as a practical guided set of exercises next week. You want to introduce that?
Yes, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody again. So today we're gonna focus really on the mitochondria role and ATP, essential for energy, muscular contraction, brain activity. Also, what we're just gonna share is also gonna be about this week. We're gonna focus on the. Just unmute yourself if you are in the room, Naima. So we're going to focus on 2 things. First, today is going to be more about the learning and understanding. And next week, we will have the opportunity with the practical practice to go into that embodiment of all this understanding, or maybe some part of the understanding, even a small part, it's a huge shift. So we're going to talk about cellular health. Then we have the aging impact, mitochondria function, decline with age. What is very interesting is, Pablo, something that I don't know, and maybe you will share more about, is the age of the mitochondria, how long it really lives. And this is very interesting. Vitality and longevity. Then we're going to focus on hormesis, low level of stress. How it's possible to strengthen the mitochondria and make them more efficient. I have a lot of experience with breathing exercise, and I see really a very deep effect in that. Hypoxia, low oxygen, boost mitochondrial efficiency. This is already proven by many scientific papers, and support of metabolism. Now, the metabolism is something that I would like to share about my personal experience, that in the first year, I was doing a lot of breath work and I started to lose a lot of weight. So it's burn.
Issue that there.
Yes. Thank you. I'm back. So I was cut off probably by metabolic activity, metabolism, and mitochondria. Let's see. Everybody is back. Yes.
Okay. So we'll do the following format, the timing. So for those of you that are now connected live, feel free to use the chat if you have comments, questions. I will be reviewing all the comments and questions in real time, and we'll either wait to let them get addressed if that's naturally going to happen at one point, or we'll address them in between sections or at the end, depending where it fits. But feel free to not wait until the end for questions and comments, so we can keep checking with you. And I think the best way to start, Yati, is do you want to maybe bring up the first slide so we start with the core?
Yes,
and,
can you see it?
Several years of experience. You need to understand the mitochondria. I think we're, but just give me a. each human has about 35 trillion cells, 35, 37 trillion cells, each with a few hundred thousand mitochondria. We have probably 30 to 40 trillion bacteria in our gut. They're much smaller by size and weight, but they each have their own mitochondria. When you look at life, how long most humans could live without food, it's measured in weeks. Even people with a low amount of body fat, if they have all the other things, air, how long you can live without water, it's at most days. How long you can live without oxygen is measured in minutes, not even hours. That's just the obvious case of how the mitochondria is at the core. The second key thing to understand is that they're like the powerhouse. So when the brain starts to malfunction, we're right now understanding that things like Alzheimer's are being considered almost like a diabetes type 3. It's not that that hasn't changed. The key thing we want to use in Thrive Beyond is the connection. We had a false belief that when we age, the mitochondria became less healthy. Now we know it's the opposite. The diseases of aging happen when the mitochondria are not well cared for. The way you could say, oh, many Western men in the US become fat in their 30s. That's not a natural thing. That is the result of very unnatural patterns. So the decay of the mind in the 80s, the decay of the body in the 40s, it's all a misunderstanding of how the oxygen and hormesis is done. And in fact, we went in the opposite direction. We're starting to see lower life expectancy, lower life quality, and chronic diseases. So we're going to start with the first point that I want to overview, which is there is no way to have a healthy health span without healthy mitochondria. And there is no way to have healthy mitochondria without a series of elements that sustain it. We will talk in these weeks about nutrition, about stress management, about purpose. But we're going to focus right now on the core, which is hormesis is defined as the healthy stress that allows the body to become resilient, stronger. For example, the brown fat that gets developed as the hormesis of being exposed to the cold develops mitochondria in fat cells that used to not have fat and are able to use energy and oxygen to produce heat. If we don't use them, they disappear and they modulate hormones. If we never stress our oxygen levels, we become less and less able to use oxygen well. We have oxidative problems. We have things like cancer. So I'll give one example and then I'll pass it to Yati. I was very lucky to work with Stefan Reschaffen and the person who authored the book with Wim Hof to try innovation developed in Germany in the about 2017, where they developed a cell gym. They said the healthiest people train at altitude. Mm-hmm. What are they training? They're training lower concentration of oxygen that allows the body to become more adaptive to being able to use oxygen more efficiently, to recycle mitochondria that are not working so well rather than let them become senescent. And then the question was, could you replicate some of that in a very individualized technical way? So the Cell Gym is a tens of thousands of dollars machine. It started, I think, like at $70,000 each one. That provides you the following, and they have it at the Longevity Center at Blue Spirit. You provide oxygen in intervals. First is if you're at sea level, where you oxygenate. Then they take to the equivalent of 1,000 meters, while you're being monitored your heart rate variability, and your oxygen levels. And it lets it go down, then takes it up, then down. And it's almost like going to a normal gym, where you start doing repetitions until you find the muscle at its hormetic ideal, and then you keep getting stronger. Now, what's really beautiful is that's a combination of very modern, high-cost biohacking, let's say, for the mitochondria, and that then Stefan and others tested that you could get almost the same with some breathwork techniques that came from thousands of years ago and Wim Hof. But now it's not a woo-woo, you subjectively feel better. Now we understand what's happening. We're activating the hormetic stress, the hormonal balance, and the hypoxia. So I want to pass it now to Yati to introduce how we want to take this core understanding of biology into this collective learning, and we'll start pointing out some of the things that can be done once you get this understanding clearly. Because the worst thing you can do is say like, okay, aging is natural. It would be like saying getting fat at my 30s and obese is natural. It is common these days, but it is in fact anti-natural. Yet you wanna go in a little bit on the hypoxia.
Yeah, so in hypoxia, there is something very interesting that is happening is when we do the first round, let's say, for example, a Wim Hof method, we do the 30 breaths or the active, and then we exhale and we hold. Now, the first round, we are able to withstand without oxygen, without breathing. Usually, whatever the amount of time, let's say the first round is 1 minute, you will pay attention to something interesting that the second, third round, you are starting to improve. Basically, the need from the brain to breathe is prolonged. Now, this is amazing because you are able to withstand without breathing, but also there is a downside to it, that you can experience shallow water blackout. Basically, you can faint for a second because you don't feel the urge for air. So there is two sides to that. The good side is meaning, and it's proving each time that you can train the cells, because the first round and then you improve. So the training of the cells is not in one round, but it's in few rounds. So in order to train, we need 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds of the Wim Hof method in order to see results. I remember when I started, I want to go back to the metabolic activity, that it's burn tons of metabolic activity. You can see like you can sweat, you can burn, and yeah, this is very important point. Yeah, the metabolic activity. Yeah. So you can train, definitely you can train and you can see results.
And now you can buy a $70,000 personalized cell gym, like Stefan did for Street. Or you can get almost the same by having an oximeter, so you can actually see your ability to get stress. Personalizing the protocols, because anything you repeat always the same, hormesis anymore. It's like if you go to the gym and for 1 year you just keep doing the same stress at the same level to the muscle.
Very good point.
But also you have to be conscious that this works best with combined with a couple of other things. One of the things that mitochondria need to do is that as they start to not become so healthy, they are able to be recycled. If always overfeeding the body and never stressing it, it never needs to select, but it's called senescent cells. So we will discuss a bit later, for example, the value of fasting, like fasting from calories, in helping the body do autophagy in its own cells that are already going low, in terms of activating stem cells, and in terms of recycling mitochondria. When this is not done, it's like the equivalent if you never change, say, the oil in your car. Like you keep putting fuel, but you never allow like the old things to go. The experience that you have subjectively is also because we understand one thing now that one of the top professors at Harvard in psychiatry is understanding, which is that it seems that most mental illnesses that have been growing are metabolically linked. So very sadly, we have not only seen a decrease in obesity, which is like an obvious metabolic disease. And as he says, we don't have a healthcare system in the US, we have a disease care, which means you get a disease, and then for the rest of your life, you just keep buying medicines. Really, at Thrive Beyond, what we want to do is to help your body come to its optimal health, which is a little bit different from the current model. So what's now known, and part of the kind of beyond we're doing in Thrive Beyond, is that there's been a rise, sadly, in diseases from depression to anxiety to bipolar disorder to ADHD in most Western countries. The correlation with metabolic disease is very high. And now they've been doing interventions, such as bringing bipolar patients to not just use traditional medications, but things like a more ketogenic diet and Wim Hof hypoxia, and the effect of hormesis of the cold on mitochondria of brown fat. The same is happening with autoimmune diseases. A body that has the mitochondria, the metabolism healthy, starts to not be able to have the quality of metabolic process. So the brain cells and the muscle cells have the most mitochondria per cell because they're the ones that need the most oxygen to do their work. Many people report a subjective mental clarity. People that have often been doing breathwork in older traditions for years would do it, but we didn't understand. We thought maybe that just felt nice. Now we know that the center of their cells have more mitochondria that are more helpful. They recycle older mitochondria earlier. They recycle senescent pieces that could become cancerous. They stop anti-inflammatory responses that go overboard and give you autoimmune diseases. And then you realize that most of the medications we have been developing are basically founded on, rather than addressing the metabolic health of the mitochondria, solving little symptoms of the same problem. And that what we think happens in your 40s is not only not natural, it's the result of our practices. And that's where I think one of the things we like a lot at Thrive Beyond and the 5D approach is that we were lucky to have this being birthed at one of the biggest blue zone in the planet, in Nicoya, Costa Rica, where already showed in very clear data of people's ability to live longer, healthier, walking actively until over 100 years without spending on medications. One of the things that was very key is that walking naturally through the day and keeping active through your life, we will realize that sedentarism is going to be the new smoking. If you go to the gym for 1 hour and then sit sedentary alone in the screen for the rest of the day, you will have less metabolic mitochondrial health than if you never go to a gym, but life has dancing, movement, full articular rotation and consciousness. That's why one of the things we really want to approach in these 12 weeks is how to develop something that fits the life of each person, rather than like spending a gym and then spending a program online. And you may not only not be getting results, but you may actually be giving the body the opposite of what it really needs. So, yeah, do you want to maybe briefly put the slides where we sit? And one of the things I just mentioned is things like dancing. You know, has so many health benefits of coordination, expression, of oxytocin develop, like a release, of dopamine release. We have a lot of people that are taking serotonin reuptake inhibitors because they seem to be low on serotonin. Most of those people are getting no results. About 70% of the people do not respond to the first 3 antidepressants. Most of them spend 20 or 30 years getting almost no results. Because then what happens is that the body becomes less good at producing and metabolizing its own serotonin. So it's not that serotonin does not play. It's that if all you do is externally feed serotonin to a metabolism that is not healthy, or like that if you feel anxiety and rather than do hormesis, you take a numbing anxiety medication, smaller and smaller things become overwhelming.
Pablo, I would like to add something also. As for my practices in the Wim Hof method and other practices, I was also doing in some moments in my life too much, meaning 2-3 times a day breathing, for example, or I was exhausting myself for surfing for hours. Now you can achieve the opposite effect, meaning if you do too much hormetic stress is the short-term stress, but if you exhaust the body from the hormetic stress, you can also get the downside results, like from cold exposure too much, or too much breathing, or even too much focusing on certain diet, that you can get the opposite results. And today we see it in many people that are going the opposite direction, because it's about the balance. It's all about the balance, and that's why next
Exactly.
week we're going to learn the breathing, how to incorporate and find your balance. Maybe one breath work a day will be enough. Maybe you need 2
How
times
much
a
is
day.
too much is one question. So how much is too much is not a big answer. And that's one of the key things to understand now. We're very lucky now to have personalized trackers like Oura Rings or Whoops, but also your own intuition. So if you saw a curve, hormesis is like if you never study and are in comfort, muscle starts to decay. After 4 you want muscle mass with no stress. You start losing. So, but doesn't get used at all. The body, by evolution, says, let's not use it. You start providing a certain stress, which is hormetic, move the muscle, to hypoxia. Most people who train, sadly, are overtraining. They're overtraining muscles, they're overtraining joints.
Yeah.
So this point is very important. The definition of hormesis is exactly that middle ground, but that middle ground is dynamic. So some people talk that there's a minimum viable dose for cold exposure. Under most research, under 15 degrees, 11 minutes, 3 times a week gives you the basic. But that's not hormesis. That's the minimum useful dose. Hormesis is what your healthy age and edge of metabolism requires. So Yati in surfing has a different edge than Pablo has in surfing or than Julia has in Ashtanga. If you keep doing every time the same exercise, it looks like you'll be a great dose for Pablo, but it's actually not helping Julia, and it's too much for Yati. So the real gift of hormesis is to develop your inner intuition, have some tracking, and tune to this. The second thing that is very important, and we'll discuss this, especially in inflammation. Most people have excess inflammation now and high cortisol, which means the fight or flight that we get when we're stressed is helpful. It gives adrenaline, it numbs pain, it motivates us. If you have a little bit of that, your body is actually better. If you are most of the day in fight or flight, you never do the resting and restorative part of stress. Biology is anti-fragile. If you never stress it, it decays. If you stress it too much, you overdo it. If you stress it in the right range, it comes back stronger. Muscles with a little stress come back stronger. The brain,
I saw it with the breathing. I was able to improve results while taking a short break of a few days for practice. Then I was able to improve results. If I would take too much practice, then the results will come like for the beginning. I will regress. So a little bit of a timeline is good.
And I'll express 2 more things that are essential as we set our principles on Thrive Beyond. One is a beginner mindset. To take an off-the-shelf expert advice is a bad way to map your long-term health, because most things are based on averages of populations that are not even that healthy. So you don't want to just not be weak. You want to thrive in your movement, mobility, coordination. So one of the things we're going to invite in the second half is to understand the purpose of what you're doing, so you don't take protocols that are just generic. Second, what else is necessary for that stress to work? For example, if you do food fasting, but don't have enough water with electrolytes like magnesium, sodium, and potassium, it's stress. And actually the fasting weakens the body. So we're going to go through each of these ones to say, you need to do the stress, but provide the complementary thing that helps you come back healthier. And right now we're seeing too much extremes. Many people staying too comfortable, and those who choose stress overdoing it. So the best way to find the right balance, and that's why we like doing this, is to learn in community. The best way to understand hypoxia is to do it in mixed ways. To do regular breathing, could be like Wim Hof, or like you can do in other traditions of yoga and breathwork. To also stress sometimes your body with high interval training, ideally in land and water. To do things that are joyful. And I'm going to just close on this for the first half of this intro. The most common factor that is aging people is having cortisol always high. Because the stress hormone can often stay high even as you're pushing too hard your, so to speak, healthy routines. If you never allow your body the sigh of relaxation, you never allow the cellular processes to come back. That's why more than hours of sleep is, can you get restorative sleep? Now we have ability to strike that. That's more than how long I stay in the cold, is can you stay in the cold in the way that you choose, without shivering, without fighting. And then we realize that when you do that, other metabolic things get better. So this is one of the things we really want to set from the stage. We're not focused on living longer on more medications. We're not focused on a health plan that's unique for everyone. We're not focused on more is always better, even though most people are doing too little on average. But sadly, those who are like you guys are overdoing it, including doing too many things all at once. If you are fasting while you're also doing high level of breath work, you're learning 3 new things, rather than allow each thing to do its success, you end up minimizing the effect. So for example, we're going to start on next week with a practical way to see which things complement each other well. Wim Hof almost intuitively found that hypoxia and exposure to cold water are great complements. We will walk through some of these parts where, like, we understand, for example, fasting for autoimmune disease. You don't want to do that in certain times. For women's health, the same men would do it. There's things that affect a lot women's fertility and hormonal basis for menopause. There's many men who get told in their 50s to check their prostate. It's enlarged, and then they get surgery and medication. Whereas the right protocol of breathwork, ice, and exercise after cooling, rather than cooling after exercise, can reverse this. Why? Because that changes the metabolism, that changes the hormone, that changes, in the case of men, testosterone, that changes how stem cells are done. We used to not do research like this. We just got average research and off-the-book recommendations. And we almost told people, you're going to get prostate enlarged at your 50s, you're going to get fat at your 40s, you're going to like break your hip in your 80s. Peter Attia has the best model, I think, that we can use. And I'll pause a little bit there for questions, which is, he calls it the Centenarian Olympics. What are the things you want to do at 100 to live a beautiful, thriving life? Dancing, lifting kids, going up a hike, being able to plant seeds and stuff. So then he says, if you're going to be doing that at 100, you cannot start exercising at 90. When you've broken your hip, you're in a hospital. You need to think, what do you need to keep healthy at 90? Your spine, your lungs. And then he takes that all the way back to your 40s, where the big changes happen. And we'll map for each of you a purpose of what you want to do with your longevity. So then we reverse engineer what you should be focusing on now to be the centenarian Olympian. You want to thrive. You don't want, for example, I always used to think of Usain Bolt as an example. Most humans cannot run 100 meters under 10 seconds, but it is possible. And it's not only genetic. Most marriages right now are very unsuccessful. It's a very archaic old model, which was patriarchal, where women were mostly property. And the fact that they're failing, Esther Perel would used to come to Blue Spirit and help Peter Attia think about relationships. It's surprising that a cake model was failing. And not being even divorced. Most people that were technically married were not thriving. So we cannot look at averages, the average health of the US, the average marriage to say what's possible. We look at extraordinary possibilities like the centenarians of Costa Rica to go from what's possible to bring it into our lives. And that's how we think about the new earth. We break false trade-offs. You can have thriving life, meaning serotonin, oxytocin, all these things in your life without necessarily having to spend millions in biohacking. We thank very much the edge workers that are doing like Brian Johnson, the stuff, but then we bring it back. And so our approach is to look at ancestral wisdom, modern science, the right level for each person's long goals, and everyone's different goals. Like I'm not a surfer at this point in my life. Who knows? I could become. I unlikely can start at 80. I do want, like Naima, to dance a lot beautifully and freely in my hundreds. So probably I don't want to destroy my back now. And this way of thinking, it's the opposite of being afraid of death. It's going joyfully. When Ram Dass first came back from India, he spoke with Stefan and he told Stefan, you know what? It's very strange. I went and people were always telling me, Ram Dass, you look so old. And I was like, why? Like, I feel so healthy. And in India, what they meant is you look so wise. When you first came, you look like an over-intellectual Western Harvard academic using psychedelics to touch the beyond. But you did not start that in your being. You did not have a practice. What they meant in India, the old people don't try to put Botox to look like young people. They try to embrace the wisdom that over thousands of years that culture led to aging gracefully. Many of them are able to walk up the Himalayas in their 90s, not to try to look like a 20-year-old, but to be the most thriving version of that part. I think that's the last part to really understand that most species who live long have some periods. One where they have physical growth, like we did between 0 and 16. But let's say if Yati in the first 20 years became 6 foot tall, he's not going to become 12 foot tall at 40. But in the US, most people kept eating as if they were growing children. So they grew excess fat, they grew cancer, and they grew inflammatory things because it was too much. So the idea is to also have the wisdom to let each stage in your life have the right hormesis for it.
By the way,
and that's
Pablo,
one of the things you want to Yes.
I want to cut you for a second. By the way, last examination I did in the hospital of Sima, I grew up a few centimeters in the last years, which is crazy. And I think it's because of the work of Pilates and strengthening my back. So when we start working and stretching our back daily and working, one is able to really expand a few centimeters. I was surprised that I couldn't believe. She was like, hey, this is your height now. So it is possible to grow higher in the age of 40.
It is possible to grow taller, but exactly, it's not by feeding your body excess carbohydrates like little kids do need. Like as a little kid, you love sugar. And that's not because kids are stupid metabolic kids. It's like at that stage, excess carbohydrates become a lot of tissues. At this age, it's like I was saying, Stefan practices Pilates daily. And he's always told me that what he understood in the East, both China, Tibet, India, they always say a healthy back, a healthy aging. Most Westerns have a very unhealthy back. And Pilates gives you a healthy back, not by injections, not by titanium in like implants, but by having more active mindfulness control over the inner workings of your posture. And that's what we want everyone to be able to do here. Things that allow your own inner wisdom to keep you healthy rather than external medications or surgeries. I'm gonna open today for a bit, yeah, since we at the beginning, I think maybe it's not even getting recorded to give us more freedom, because I think when your connection went on and off, the record stopped.
It is recorded, by the way.
Okay.
But yes,
okay.
we are open.
But
we are open for your guidance.
I went a little faster. Not really sure of your internet connection, but that means we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is so. Let's just open briefly to Naima and Jan to see what's resonating, what you would like to know a bit more what's possible, and then we'll touch a little bit in that way, and we'll use the second half to explain how the extended team comes together for these issues.
Okay, go ahead, Naima.
Naima, you're on video but on mute. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, first, just thank you. This has been already so interesting and helpful. So thank you very much. I still feel like new to some of those terms like hypoxia. So I look forward to understanding that more as we proceed. And yeah, what's really resonating is this part about, the inner wisdom and the wisdom of ourselves and our body, and yes, learning from science and experts and things, but how can we over our time, really trust what is good for us and just become more wise in that way, instead of just depending on external medications and things. So yeah, really helpful, and look forward to learning more. So thank you.
Great, and we'll go a little deeper on the definition of hypoxia, but we'll go to Jan, and then we'll also let both of you share a little bit of what motivates you to bring this understanding of health, longevity, and vitality into your own lives. So I think that's always nice to hear. But I'll let Jan briefly chime in, and then we'll pass it to Naima on her and her circle of affinity that motivates them. Jan?
Yes, Pablo and Yahtzee, thank you for, again, bringing these different understandings and personal experiences and practices into the field. The things that I felt were strongly resonating with me was the fact that these misconceptions about how we age and the natural order of aging, and how it was, in the past, it was normal to think that our bodies degrade at specific rates. So that's really important. And then talking about the stresses like cortisol, proper rest, and going from doing too little to too much. And I feel like that's something that has been a lifelong struggle. Is either I tend to go into extremes. So for sure, it's like not only understanding processes and the practice, but also understanding where is that zone where it's most effective, right? Because my experience personally with these things has been to go from one extreme to the next. Moderation has been quite challenging. So it's like finding that pathway, the middle way. And,
yes, and your intuition is very right, but we're offering you an even better language, because the middle way may not be even the ideal way, the hormetic thriving way. The whole concept of this is that there is a sweet spot, may not even be in the middle. It's for sure not in doing nothing. It's for sure not in overdoing. And it's definitely not static. And now, one of the things, I'll pass it now to both of you to also say motivation, but I want to explain a little bit of the dynamic we're going to do. We're going to have a WhatsApp group of several attuned experts in areas. So Dr. Caro is herself a medically trained doctor in Costa Rica, working in the gynecology department at the biggest hospital, because as Naima knows well, many women issues used to not be researched well by a patriarchal healthcare system run and kind of developed by males. So for example, almost all heart attacks in women are misdiagnosed because they happen with very different symptoms than male heart attacks. So this is something so fundamental, like understanding the heart attacks used to be very badly done. So we're very lucky to have people who have expertise as medical doctors, who themselves are sound healers, and know the vibrational, yoga, and part, and then we work together. Or Dax, himself very expert in having brought things like CrossFit to Costa Rica, and he sees most of his athletes overdoing it, getting injuries in their 40s, in fact, limiting what they can do in their 80s, 40s, overtraining. And he showed 3 key concepts that if you want to, let's say, go high into CrossFit, before you start putting more loads, you need to train controlled articular rotations at the edge of the small muscles so that that range of motion like this one gets exercised. Because people over-exercise this little range because, say, for men, they want big biceps. But that's completely unadaptive to what you're really trying to do. And then you get a couple of weak points where you have low proprioception of the kind of neurogenesis you need to do for brain neural mappings to map that range with control and with strength. So one of the things that we're very excited to bring is this WhatsApp group will mean that this is not a content class. The world has excess content, and we don't need to repeat Huberman or Attia. We're trying to become a community of engaged learning with direct practice, with practitioners that we will be talking, and you can go deeply with one, and then you're not confused by one person giving you contradictory things. You have a common language, a common practice, based on this Blue Zone insight that we also knew. And the third part is that we have centers of practice where you can go and practice in a tuned way. Because what also happens is maybe you're motivated by this. Maybe Naima says, this is great. I just saw there's a cold plunge here in Salta. But that cold plunge may have a completely different understanding and mentality. Or like she says, I think there's some supplements that are important. I'm going to go see if I need magnesium. But then you go to someone completely unattuned to this, who just believes that you as a woman are going to, by default, get these diseases at your 40s. So what we want to have is a set of collective guidance. In this, so we explain a better way of thinking about longevity and vitality. The WhatsApp group with the experts that we have a common language. Your individual purpose and experience, so we can help each other learn in a continuous way. And then centers that do this. And then an extra one that I think we haven't developed, but I know we will, which is events that are not retreats. I've done some of these kind of things with Yati and Naima, where the idea is not to retreat from your life to come back to normal, to get like a little band-aid to your unsustainable psychological and metabolic life. You want to go to experience firsthand in co-living for deep enough, like we did in Pachamama with Yati and Naima's extended family, bringing climate leaders to change how from within they operate in trying to support the future of the climate world rather than just burn out in the effort. Or if we talk about longevity and vitality, let's not just retreat for a week to then come back to burnout as usual, which is what sadly people are sometimes doing in Costa Rica. They take a high-end, nice retreat, even maybe well done. Maybe the yoga that get there is actually okay yoga, but there is none of this that we're doing here, which is like, how can I make this a 12 to 18 sustained process of transformation? So each gathering that we'll be hosting is an activation, and it includes community. So I'll pass it just briefly now. Naima, do you want to share a little bit of what motivates you to be into longevity, shirt coding, that kind of stuff, and how you would love to be kind of weaving into this that we're starting?
Yeah. Also, just to say exciting about the WhatsApp group and the experts and the common language and all of and the guidance. I think that's very exciting. So eager to hear more. Yeah, for me, I don't know, several years ago, actually during the pandemic, had this sense of like, I want to live to at least 120. And you know, if I before that's fine, but just this like, yeah, desire to really live life, enjoy life, and see what's possible. I think we're in a really fascinating moment in history and evolution, and really excited to see what we go through. And I think personally, yeah, in terms of spiritual development, to see what can happen, and also in terms of healing of the planet, of ourselves. So I think it's a lot of curiosity and desire to live and enjoy life in community with the vibe tribe. that I'm excited about. So yeah, that's
Great.
me. Also to say, I'm a few hours ahead of you, and I actually am really trying to do sleep routine. So I'm going to stay on a little bit, but I'll head off
Great.
in a while.
We support
doing
sleep
my
as a core habit of health. I have a full week on that, and I have double tried
exactly. So yeah,
eat ridiculous to talk about health and stay up late. So, but while you're there, I'm going to highlight two things that I was very excited that you would join us, which is before you set up health goals, it's important to have a purpose for them. Like, let's say you want to live longer, and like, for what? Let's say you want to be more fit. To do what? And it could be that you want to be more fit, not to be an Instagram influencer, but to play with your little kid. And that would be great. That will take you further than a really more self-centered, egocentric, over-individualized in the eyes of others, that you cannot your own taste as your real life. So when I think of why Naima may want to live longer, I can imagine her being a beacon of the possible for bringing the female wisdom into what the new earth can be for health, vitality, musical expression, dance, sexual activity in a healthy way. Co-living as a way of learning to go beyond very separated ways of creating, let's say, a sense of going beyond isolation. And it's an experiment on an epidemic. Like our ancestors, like the grandfather made a bold idea to an army. That seemed impossible. Like when her mom, for the first time in human history, to have a female person bring all of the planet for the first time ever, on everyone agreeing on climatic goals, it is possible. There were a lot of forces that didn't want that to stay, but showing something's possible is really like magic. So I think what I feel excited now is we don't just say nice things into our own community. And if we block to income and know it is possible, are not bringing this to our South planet, who are we waiting for to do it? So that's a little bit what gets me excited. So feel free to go to sleep, knowing that we got you covered. We're anyway only going to take 8 more minutes. I don't know if Yati want to share something. Maybe I can invite Julia if you wanted to share something. She's maybe not far away. We can hear her voice. But she also hasn't slept for today, so her priority is sleep because she came from Europe on a crazy schedule. Yati, you wanna just give a little bit of a connection between now and next week?
Yeah. So as we start moving one more step ahead into this beautiful journey of awakening our intuition, which is truly what we seek for these meetings, awakening our intuition. And next week, we're going to do it with an exercise of breath work. We're going to feel hypoxia, low amount of oxygen. We're going to feel also high amount of CO2 in so-called Boteca method, when we're going to breathe very slowly through the nose. So we're going to experience the both extremities, and we're going to see how they affect us. And this will be recorded, so you will have this practice for the future. And yeah, so this is what is waiting for us next week.
And in between now and next week, we will have the WhatsApp group put together. And we'll let each of the persons introduce themselves, about 12 of them. And we have right now 6 centers of practice that already exist, like Health Excel in San Jose, La Colmena, Bhakti Shala, the Center of Joy at Las Catalinas, very likely Nosara 1 or 2, because I think the way I see the most impact is to have shared learning, like we're doing here, like we're see the video, ask questions. We don't need to give you more content. We need to be better navigators what exists. Second, the practice that we'll do next week, where we find our healthy hormesis and find better ways to make it connected to our own purpose. And third, places and activities where we can go and practice, because the very it'll seem like there's like few participants and 3 times as many guides, but that's because all the guides have a beginner mindset. We have an excess of wisdom, but completely low ego. And I think one of the things that has made learning slow is that the medical profession developed too much of a sense of fixed expertise. So you would often go to the doctor less with curiosity and just like, okay, you're the expert, just give me this. And a much nicer would be a lifelong traveling. And that's what we'll be starting next week. This, for them, was a little bit less helpful because they know a lot of the core theory we shared with them over the last few months to prepare for this. But when we go into the practice, everyone, including experts, are going to be tuning how that practice helps them. Yati will be tuning how he's, as a case study himself, taking it to his own, for example, allergies and surfing. I'm going to be working with my own metabolic disease. So we will all be real-time case studies of the possible with the medical support. And then we will help you navigate if you need support in one area. Maybe it's nutrition. Maybe it's habits. Maybe it's the strength and flexibility. So that we have a much smarter way to navigate. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to send a couple of short questions so that you tell us what are a couple of the things that will be more useful. Like I think Jan mentioned one that we thought most people would want to frame better, which is, what is not the happy medium, but the ideal hormesis? Understanding that many of us who are highly motivated tend to overdo it. Yati has, I have, Julia has, and that most people are doing too little. So it is hard to learn from any of those extremes. We want to find the dose that is ideal for thriving, not to avoid injury or to not die young, but to live the healthiest possible life for your purpose. So thank you very much for starting on this adventure. And we're very much looking forward to these next 3 months of sharing, community, and practice. And we'll be sending both a combination of notes and a couple of articles to read so that we don't make the sessions heavy on content, because we are overburdened by content. We want to come with more beautiful questions and a more helpful model, and then take this to the world. So have a beautiful night, and we'll be in touch in the WhatsApp group, and see you next week.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, everybody.
Ciao.
Good night.